I worked my entire life for a scholarship and finally got it, but now my classmates are saying I didn't really earn it, just because I'm a woman in STEM. I still remember the day I opened the email and saw it. Congratulations. You have been awarded the STEM Excellence Scholarship. My heart was pounding so fast I thought it might burst. I had spent countless nights in the lab, poring over formulas, debugging code, running experiments, memorizing data, sacrificing weekends and sleep, and finally it had paid off. I had earned this moment. I ran to my dorm room holding my laptop, unable to stop shaking. My roommates cheered. Some hugged me, but even in their excitement, I felt a strange unease. I couldn't put my finger on it yet, but something about the way a few of my classmates looked at me made my stomach tighten. The next morning, whispers followed me across campus. Did she really earn it? One of them muttered as I passed by. I froze, trying to ignore the words. Maybe they were joking, I told myself. Maybe I was overthinking. But then another comment cut sharper. I guess a girl in STEM doesn't really have to try that hard. I blinked, unsure if I heard correctly. Did someone really just say that? A girl in STEM doesn't have to try? I felt my chest tighten. All the hours I spent in labs, all the projects I led, every single late night, it suddenly felt invisible, dismissed as if my achievement wasn't mine at all. I tried to shrug it off, but the next few days made it impossible. During group projects, some classmates snickered every time I mentioned the scholarship. They rolled their eyes when I explained a formula. One even muttered under their breath, "She only got it because of diversity programs, not talent." My hands shook slightly, my notebook trembling as I scribbled notes, wondering if everyone really saw me as undeserving. At lunch, I sat alone, scrolling through messages. Some were congratulatory, but most were coded in judgment. Every compliment seemed to carry a shadow of doubt, every smile laced with envy. I had achieved something monumental, but suddenly it felt like a stain rather than a triumph. That evening, I sat in the library, surrounded by textbooks and notebooks, trying to remind myself why I worked so hard. I had spent years proving to myself that I was capable, that I belonged in STEM. But now the question that haunted me was, does it even matter if they don't think I earned it? I clenched my fists, a spark of defiance igniting. I wasn't going to let their whispers or judgments erase my effort. I had done this for me, for the countless nights I had refused to give up, for every experiment that failed and then succeeded because of my persistence. Their opinions didn't define my achievements. But even as I told myself this, a pang of sadness lingered. I had never expected celebrating my success would feel so lonely, so full of scrutiny. I realized that this scholarship was more than recognition. It was a test, not of my skill, but of my strength to endure those who questioned it. Have you ever had someone doubt your achievements just because of who you are? By the second week after winning the scholarship, the whispers had grown louder. Every time I entered the lab or walked into the lecture hall, I could feel eyes following me, judging me. Some classmates exchanged glances, smirking as if I had just done something wrong. The scholarship that was supposed to be a symbol of my hard work now felt like a spotlight on my failures, or at least on what they claimed were my failures. During a group assignment, one of my classmates, Jason, scoffed when I mentioned my scholarship while explaining a complicated problem. "Wow, the scholarship winner must be so smart," he said, but the tone was dripping with sarcasm. Or maybe she just got lucky because diversity. I froze, my notebook clutched tight in my hands, unsure how to respond. My heart raced, my face burned, but I swallowed my pride and said nothing. Silence hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. At lunch, things got worse. Two girls at the next table whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "She didn't really earn it. She only got it because it's a girl in STEM. Anyone could have done what she did and still gotten it." I wanted to stand up and shout, to defend myself, but the words stuck in my throat. I felt my hands trembling as I ate, wishing I could disappear. Even professors weren't immune to the gossip. One day after class, I overheard a couple of students murmuring, "I wonder if she's really that talented or just good at impressing the faculty." My chest tightened. Did they really think my countless late nights in the lab, the experiments I ran over and over, the meticulous projects I led, were all just for show? The frustration bubbled inside me, and for the first time since winning the scholarship, doubt crept in. That evening, I sat in my dorm room staring at the certificate on my desk. The official recognition of my effort now felt heavy. I had worked tirelessly to prove my capability in a male-dominated field, and yet here I was, feeling like my success was a lie in the eyes of others. I tried to remind myself, this scholarship wasn't given for my gender, it was given for my accomplishments. But the whispers lingered, haunting every corner of my mind. I started questioning myself. Had I really earned it? Was it just luck or timing, and not my skill? The anxiety gnawed at me as I went through my notes, checking every solution, every calculation, wondering if someone would try to find a mistake to justify their doubts. It wasn't just jealousy, it was a battle against a stereotype, a fight to prove that a woman in STEM could achieve without question. But deep down, a small spark of determination remained. I couldn't let their judgment define me. I had worked too hard to crumble now. I decided I would prove to them, and to myself, that I belonged here. The scholarship wasn't a gift, it was proof, and I wasn't about to let anyone convince me otherwise. How would you react if classmates undermined your hard work because of your gender? By the third week after receiving the scholarship, I realized ignoring the whispers wasn't enough. The murmurs, the snide comments, and the questioning glances weren't going away. If anything, they were growing louder. I could either let them define me or take back control. I chose control. During lab that day, I arrived early, methodically setting up my experiment. Jason and a few others walked in, casting smirks and whispering. I ignored them. Focus became my shield. When the professor asked a challenging question about the experiment, I answered confidently, detailing my reasoning step by step. A few heads turned. The whispers faded as the professor nodded in approval. Later, in the group assignment discussion, I spoke up again. This time, instead of letting Jason's sarcasm derail me, I calmly explained my calculations, showing the logic behind every number. One of my classmates, who had been quiet until now, whispered, "Wow, she actually knows her stuff." That small acknowledgement felt like a victory, a crack in the wall of doubt built by jealousy and bias. At lunch, I caught snippets of conversations, some still tinged with envy, but now others carried curiosity. A girl from my lab approached me hesitantly. "Can you explain how you solved the last experiment?" I didn't understand it. I smiled. Sharing my knowledge wasn't about proving myself to the critics. It was about teaching and empowering others. As I explained, her eyes widened with understanding, and she nodded. For the first time, I felt a little of the isolation lift, but jealousy was still present. Jason muttered under his breath, "Show off," while glancing at me. I ignored him. I had learned that confrontation wasn't always about arguing. It was about demonstrating capability consistently and calmly. Every experiment I performed, every question I answered correctly, every project I completed on time became a silent rebuttal to the whispers and doubts. Even in group meetings, when someone tried to discredit my suggestions, I didn't respond with anger. I provided clear evidence and reasoning, letting results speak louder than opinions. Slowly, I noticed subtle shifts. People who had been dismissive began nodding when I spoke, taking notes and asking questions. The scholarship that once made me a target was now a symbol of competence. That evening, I sat at my desk reviewing lab notes, reflecting on the day. I realized that standing my ground wasn't about confrontation. It was about consistency, patience, and letting my work speak for itself. I couldn't control what people said, but I could control my actions, my dedication, and my response. And even though jealousy still existed, I could feel respect growing quietly. Not everyone would approve, not everyone would understand, but the people who mattered, the professors, the peers who valued skill over bias, were starting to see the truth. For the first time since winning the scholarship, I felt a sense of empowerment. The whispers hadn't disappeared entirely, but they had lost their power over me. My focus, my knowledge, and my effort had become stronger shields than fear or doubt ever could. Have you ever felt the need to prove your skills quietly rather than argue with critics? By the fourth week, it was clear that not everyone was willing to let go of their envy quietly. Jason and a few others had begun trying to undermine my work directly. In group discussions, they interrupted my explanations, dismissed my ideas, and even attempted to redo calculations I'd already completed, insisting that I was wrong. It was subtle sabotage, a way to chip away at the respect I had slowly earned. One afternoon, during a lab experiment, I noticed that someone had moved my labeled samples, mixing up my reagents. The result was a minor error in the data I had spent hours preparing. My heart sank as I realized what had happened. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that mistakes happen, and quickly corrected the setup, recording the experiment anew. At the same time, Jason whispered under his breath, "See? Maybe the scholarship winner isn't perfect after all." A few classmates smirked. My hands shook slightly, but I refused to respond with anger. Instead, I focused on the experiment, documenting every step meticulously, ensuring there would be no room for doubt. Later in the lecture, a group presentation gave them another chance. I presented our part of the project with clarity, highlighting evidence, explaining methodologies, and answering questions with confidence. One by one, the interruptions and dismissive comments were neutralized by clear reasoning and the undeniable results we had achieved. I could see the shift in some of my classmates' expressions, admiration mixed with surprise. Despite these small victories, the emotional toll was growing. I found myself second-guessing simple actions, wondering if each step I took would be twisted into criticism. By evening, I sat in my dorm, staring at my notes, feeling both exhausted and determined. I realized that achieving the scholarship had not just opened doors academically, it had exposed me to the envy and prejudice that lingered in spaces where women in STEM are still underrepresented. But I wasn't ready to back down. I reminded myself why I had worked so hard. The late nights, the complex problems, the sacrifices I had made weren't for validation from jealous classmates. They were for my own growth and my own future. I decided that my strategy would be resilience. Every action, every answer, every completed experiment would silently demonstrate my skill and dedication. By the end of the week, a small group of peers began asking me questions respectfully, taking notes and even complimenting my work. The undermining attempts had not succeeded. Instead, they highlighted my persistence and ability to recover quickly from adversity. I began to see that while jealousy would always exist, consistent effort and unwavering focus could neutralize even the most persistent attempts at sabotage. That night, as I reviewed my experiments and prepared for the next day, I felt a growing sense of confidence. I was learning that true strength isn't just about knowledge or skill, it's about resilience, composure, and the courage to keep moving forward, even when others try to tear you down. Do you think staying calm and focusing on your task is better than confronting them directly? By the fifth week, something started to shift. The whispers and snide comments were still there, but a few classmates who had been silent observers began to speak up in my favor. It was subtle at first, small nods during discussions, quiet acknowledgments of my explanations, but it was enough to remind me that not everyone doubted my achievements. One day in lab, Ananya, a quiet student from another group, approached me hesitantly. "I just wanted to say, your explanation earlier really helped me understand the experiment. Thanks." Her sincerity warmed me. I smiled, telling her she could always ask questions whenever she needed. It was a small connection, but it felt like a victory. Allies like Ananya made the environment less suffocating, less hostile. Even Jason seemed to falter when he tried to dismiss my ideas. I had grown more confident, responding calmly and clearly to his interruptions, using data and logic rather than emotion. Slowly, classmates who had once smirked or whispered started paying closer attention to my work, some even following my methods for their own assignments. I could feel a quiet respect building, not from fear or envy, but from genuine recognition of my skill and perseverance. During a group project presentation, I noticed that a few students openly defended my points when others tried to discredit them. The dynamic in the room was changing. No longer was I isolated, I had support. I realized that resilience was not just about standing strong alone, it was also about earning trust and respect, letting my work inspire others to recognize competence over bias. Yet the jealousy hadn't disappeared entirely. Jason still made sarcastic comments under his breath, and a few of the more vocal skeptics tried to undermine my suggestions. But with my allies present, their attempts had far less impact. The balance of power was shifting, and I could finally see the difference between empty hostility and authentic recognition. One afternoon, the professor called me aside. "I've noticed your consistency, your ability to handle disruptions, and the clarity of your work," he said quietly. "You're setting a standard in the lab. Keep it up." His words felt like validation, not only of my scholarship, but of my perseverance in the face of skepticism. I nodded, grateful, and felt my confidence grow even more. That evening, I sat in the dorm common room with Ananya and a few other classmates who had begun to show respect for my work. We exchanged ideas, tips, and encouragement, and I realized that creating these connections was as important as any experiment or assignment. Having allies didn't make the journey easier, it made it meaningful. I thought about the scholarship again, about the criticism and envy it had sparked. I understood that some people would always try to diminish others' achievements, but I also learned that persistence, clarity, and building genuine connections could break down even the strongest walls of doubt. As I closed my notebook that night, I felt stronger than I had in weeks. The scholarship was no longer a burden. It was a symbol of what I had accomplished and the relationships I was beginning to build through perseverance and courage. How important do you think allies are when facing jealousy or criticism? By the 6th week, the tension in class had reached a tipping point. The whispers had become more pointed, and Jason, clearly frustrated by my growing confidence and the respect I was earning, escalated his attempts to undermine me. He interrupted explanations more aggressively, rolled his eyes openly, and even tried to spread rumors about my scholarship being unearned. But something had changed in me, too. I had learned to rise above the noise. I no longer felt the sting of every glance or comment. Each time he tried to discredit me, I answered calmly, showing evidence and logic. No emotional reaction, no confrontation, just facts, skill, and consistency. Slowly, classmates who had previously been silent started nodding, some even defending my points when others questioned them. During one lab session, Jason deliberately swapped my notebook with another student's, hoping I would make a mistake in calculations. When the professor noticed my perfectly executed results, he raised an eyebrow and gave me a small approving nod. The room went quiet. Jason's smirk faltered, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker in his eyes. The whispers that had once tried to isolate me were fading, replaced by curiosity and respect. Outside of lab, the effect of my persistence became even clearer. Students approached me for help with assignments and experiments, and I started mentoring a small group of classmates who genuinely wanted to learn. Sharing my knowledge didn't just solidify my reputation, it created a small circle of trust and support. Even those who had doubted me initially had to acknowledge my dedication and capability. One afternoon, during a campus STEM seminar, I was invited to give a short demonstration of a recent experiment I had completed. I spoke confidently, explaining every step and answering questions with ease. The audience, including some of my classmates who had been critical before, applauded. Jason was there too. He didn't say anything, but his usual smirk was gone. In that moment, I realized that my work could speak louder than any words of envy or doubt. That evening, I reflected on the past weeks. The scholarship that had once made me a target now felt like a badge of honor. It had tested not just my intellect, but my resilience, patience, and composure. I had learned that true recognition doesn't come from silencing critics. It comes from consistent effort, integrity, and letting your actions shine. I also realized that facing jealousy and bias wasn't a punishment. It was an opportunity to prove to myself and others that women in STEM belong, that hard work and dedication are undeniable, and that respect is earned not through confrontation, but through perseverance and excellence. By the end of the day, as I closed my lab notebook, I felt a calm sense of victory. The critics were still there, but their voices no longer had power over me. I had discovered my own strength, and that strength was unstoppable. How do you handle people who try to undermine your hard work publicly? By the 7th week, the atmosphere in class had shifted dramatically. The scholarship that had once made me a target had begun to establish me as a figure of competence. Some classmates were still skeptical. Whispers still floated in corners, but the tide was turning. I could feel it, the small but growing respect from peers who valued skill over envy. During a complex lab experiment that required precise coordination, I noticed several classmates struggling with their setups. I approached calmly, offering guidance without judgment. "Try adjusting the pH here and make sure you calibrate the sensor first," I instructed. As they followed my advice, their results improved noticeably. I could see their surprise, a realization dawning that my guidance was based on experience and knowledge, not luck. Jason was watching from across the lab, his expression a mixture of irritation and disbelief. He had tried everything to undermine me, sarcasm, rumors, sabotage, but my work kept proving him wrong. When he approached to offer his critique, I listened politely, then calmly explained why his suggestion wouldn't work. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it, the small crowd around him silently witnessing my composure and expertise. That afternoon, the professor stopped me as I was packing up my equipment. "I've noticed how effectively you handle challenges, both in experiments and in group dynamics," he said quietly. "Your scholarship is well-earned, and your influence in class is positive. Keep it up." His words felt like a validation not only of my academic abilities, but also of my resilience under scrutiny. Back in the dorm, I reflected on the weeks that had passed, the whispers, the jealousy, the subtle attempts to undermine me. Each challenge had been a test, and each one had strengthened my resolve. I realized that the scholarship wasn't just an award, it was a statement. It represented the value of hard work, persistence, and integrity, even in the face of doubt and bias. By evening, a few classmates approached me, not with envy, but with curiosity and respect. They asked questions about my experiments, sought advice on assignments, and even admitted when they had underestimated me. The dynamic that had once felt hostile was evolving into collaboration. I felt a sense of empowerment, a recognition that perseverance, calm confidence, and genuine knowledge could shift perspectives more effectively than arguments or confrontations ever could. Still, the experience had taught me caution. Not everyone would change their minds, and some would always cling to bias. But I had discovered that while I couldn't control their thoughts, I could control my actions, my focus, and my response. And in doing so, I could define my own narrative. That night, I looked at my scholarship certificate on my desk. I realized that it was more than recognition. It was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that I could face challenges, endure criticism, and still emerge stronger. The turning point wasn't just about my peers' respect, it was about claiming my confidence and refusing to let doubt overshadow my achievements. How do you maintain confidence when others try to undermine you? By the 8th week, my presence in class had become more prominent than ever. The scholarship, once a target of envy, now made me a figure of competence and reliability. But as often happens, increased visibility also brought heightened scrutiny. A few classmates, still unwilling to accept my success, began planning more pointed attempts to discredit me. One afternoon during a complex lab demonstration, I noticed subtle sabotage. My equipment had been slightly misaligned, a reagent mixed incorrectly, likely to induce an error in my results. I froze for a moment, heart racing, realizing that someone was testing me directly. But years of perseverance had prepared me for exactly this type of challenge. I double-checked every step, recalibrated the instruments, and proceeded carefully. When the experiment concluded, my results were flawless. The classroom went quiet. A few classmates exchanged uneasy glances. Jason muttered under his breath, clearly frustrated, while a few others shot me cautious looks. The professor reviewed my work, nodded, and complimented the precision and clarity of my documentation. No one could argue with the results. No whispers, no sarcasm, no envy could undo the proof of my skill. Later, during a group discussion, one of the skeptics finally approached me openly. I didn't realize how much work you put into this, he admitted, his tone hesitant. I thought it was easier for you because of the scholarship, but now I see it wasn't. I smiled gently, appreciating the acknowledgement. This was exactly what I had hoped for. Not to humiliate or punish those who doubted me, but to show that effort and talent speak louder than assumptions or prejudice. Even my allies were gaining confidence. Ananya and a few others started actively contributing, inspired by the standards I had demonstrated. Together, we fostered a more positive environment, one focused on collaboration rather than jealousy. The scholarship had inadvertently created a leadership role for me, a chance to model integrity, patience, and skill for those around me. That evening, I reflected on the journey. The scholarship that had sparked envy and doubt had become a catalyst for personal growth, teaching me lessons beyond academia. I had learned resilience in the face of unfair criticism, patience with those blinded by bias, and the power of consistent excellence. I had discovered that respect is earned through action, not demanded through argument. I realized, too, that the greatest victories are not always the ones celebrated publicly. Sometimes the triumph lies in maintaining your composure, your focus, and your integrity while facing those who wish to see you fail. I had weathered whispers, sabotage, and subtle attacks, and emerged stronger, more confident, and more determined than ever. As I closed my lab notebook that night, I felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. The scholarship wasn't just a piece of paper. It was proof that effort, perseverance, and resilience matter, even when others doubt you. And it had taught me something far more valuable, that facing criticism with calm determination and unwavering dedication can turn even the harshest challenges into opportunities to rise. How would you respond if someone tried to sabotage your work publicly? By the 9th week, the atmosphere in class had shifted almost entirely. The whispers, the envy, the doubt, they were fading. My consistent performance, calm composure, and willingness to help others had gradually transformed perceptions. Those who had once questioned my merit now acknowledged my dedication, if not openly, then quietly through nods and respectful glances. During a major lab project presentation, the room was packed with classmates and the professor. I explained our team's methodology clearly, answered every question confidently, and presented our results with precision. As I spoke, I noticed Jason watching intently, his earlier smirk replaced by focused attention. A few of the skeptics were taking notes, whispering to each other about the thoroughness of my work. When the professor concluded the session, he addressed the entire class. I want to commend everyone for their efforts, but I must highlight exceptional contributions. Your name's consistent work, leadership, and attention to detail have set a high standard for all of you. The scholarship she earned is a reflection of that dedication. The words resonated deeply. I felt a quiet surge of pride. It wasn't about showing off or proving a point to those who had doubted me. It was about the validation that comes from undeniable effort and consistent integrity. For the first time in weeks, I felt the tension lift completely. My peers were no longer whispering behind my back. They were listening, learning, and in some cases, admiring. Later during a break, Ananya approached me with a bright smile. I just wanted to say, thanks for all the guidance. I've learned so much from watching how you handle everything. It's inspiring. Her words warmed my heart. This was the real impact, the ability to influence others positively through dedication, skill, and patience. Even Jason approached, hesitating slightly. I misjudged you, he admitted quietly. You really earned it. I can see that now, I nodded, acknowledging him without judgment. The tension that had once dominated our interactions was replaced by a tentative respect. As I walked back to my dorm that evening, I reflected on the journey. The scholarship had been more than recognition. It had been a test of resilience, courage, and perseverance. I'd faced jealousy, subtle sabotage, and doubt, yet I had maintained my focus, composure, and integrity. And in doing so, I had not only proven my capability, but also created an environment where others could respect and learn from me. I sat at my desk, looking at the certificate once more. I realized that the true value of the scholarship wasn't just in the recognition itself, It was in the lessons I'd learned along the way. Hard work, consistency, patience, and resilience had turned criticism into growth, envy into admiration, and doubt into acknowledgement. I felt stronger, more confident, and ready for the challenges ahead, knowing that no whisper, no attempt to discredit me could erase what I had achieved. How would you feel if your hard work finally earned public recognition? By the 10th week, the scholarship that had once made me a target had become a symbol of my journey, my perseverance, and my achievements. The tension and whispers had faded almost entirely. The envy that had followed me in the early weeks had given way to quiet respect, admiration, and genuine acknowledgement from classmates and professors alike. In lab, I moved confidently, demonstrating experiments and helping peers troubleshoot problems. Students who had once been skeptical now approached me with questions and sought guidance. I realized that the scholarship wasn't just an award, it had become a bridge connecting my hard work with others' learning, showing that dedication and resilience could inspire. Jason, who had been my fiercest critic, now worked alongside me professionally. No sarcasm in his tone, no attempts to undermine my work. He had learned, as had others, that envy could not diminish genuine achievement. The subtle respect in his actions, and in those of the classmates who had once doubted me, was a quiet yet powerful acknowledgement of the journey I had endured. That evening, I returned to my dorm and sat at my desk, staring at the scholarship certificate. It glimmered under the lamplight, but it was more than a piece of paper. It represented countless hours of effort, sleepless nights, repeated failures, and the courage to persist even when others doubted me. I reflected on the whispers, the subtle sabotage, and the moments of self-doubt. Each challenge had tested not just my knowledge, but my resilience, patience, and ability to rise above negativity. I thought about my growth. I'd learned to stand my ground calmly, to let evidence and skill speak louder than words, and to seek allies rather than fight unnecessary battles. I had discovered the strength in persistence, the importance of integrity, and the power of quiet confidence. My achievement was mine, earned through determination, and no amount of criticism or envy could ever diminish it. Later, I attended a small campus gathering where the scholarship recipients were recognized. Applause filled the room as my name was called, and I walked up to accept my certificate with a proud, steady heart. Faces in the audience reflected admiration, encouragement, and support. For the first time, I felt the full weight of my accomplishment, not just in recognition, but in the validation that perseverance, talent, and integrity could overcome even the harshest scrutiny. That night, I reflected on the entire journey from doubt and envy to acknowledgement and triumph. The scholarship had taught me more than academic skills. It had taught me resilience, self-belief, and the importance of remaining steadfast in the face of challenge. I realized that every late night, every experiment, and every moment of determination had led me not just to an award, but to a stronger, more confident self. As I carefully placed the certificate on my shelf, I smiled. I had earned it, truly earned it. And this triumph, hard-won and deeply personal, was a victory I would carry with me far beyond the walls of the classroom. How would you feel after turning doubt and envy into a journey of triumph?